Good afternoon, members of the media, wider listening and looking audience, public of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to this week's post-cabinet media conference. As you can see, I'm joined by three of my cabinet colleagues here this afternoon. I have with me the Honourable Minister of Sport, the Honourable Minister of Community and Cultural Development, and the Honourable Minister of Housing. So we'd start with the Honourable Minister of Sport this afternoon.
Thank you, colleague. First of all, I just want to welcome and congratulate Asat, who's hosting the Ioana Water Polo Tournament that is going on at the Aquatic Center in Cuba. Argentina, Brazil, Canada, who's the defending champs, and of course the host team Trinidad and Tobago. It's the first time that Trinidad has been hosting this tournament, and we're hoping that we could qualify to the other round and just gain experience from the process that we're doing. Coming out of cabinet this morning, I have good news for the hockey fraternity. They have also won a bid to host in March 25th this year the International Hockey Federation World League Round 2, where we're going to be having countries from across the globe, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Russia, Switzerland, USA, Barbados, and of course Trinidad and Tobago. It'll be held at the Hockey Center in Tacarigua, and we'll be working very closely with the hockey board, which has been doing a very good job. And we also plan to do some major work to the facility. The turf, they've been requesting that the hockey turf be changed for several years now. It's 11 years plus. And it was granted permission today from the cabinet to start work on that hockey surface, to get a new surface, and to do some other work with the lighting to make it up to international standards, to the pavilion, some fencing work, and for the first time, which should have been done the first time, we'll be bringing in a special machine that cleans and maintains the turf, which caused the current turf that we have now with the power washing and so on to have a lot of issues. So I know that's very good news for the hockey fraternity that finally that it'll be done. But more importantly, there's still some life. And as you know, when you're in some fiscal strain times, you tend to count all the pennies. We were able to work with them and the manufacturers and with the Petrotrain Sports Club to actually relocate the current turf, which has 2 or 3 more years in it, to be utilized at Petrotrain. So we're going to have 2 AstroTurf fields now for hockey, where we utilize the old one for another 3 years until we could replace that one as well. So that's very, very good news for the hockey fraternity. And we're also going to be assisting them with some funding for the tournament as well. So the guests could be here, the teams could be here. We are anticipating that between 500 to 700 athletes and fans, not just from those countries, but from neighboring islands, Guyana, and so on, because of the magnitude and the level of players in this tournament. So good news for hockey. Spinning off of the ASAT in June, July, they already started promoting it and working. They'll be hosting also the CC-CAN, which is the biggest aquatic meet in this hemisphere, never hosted in the islands before, in Trinidad before. I think it was hosted in Domrep and Barbados several years ago on a much smaller scale. But for the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, we're going to be having swimming, water polo, diving, and synchronized swimming. So look out for that as well, coming off of a spin from the water polo tournament now. So a lot of international, as I said, 28 countries, over 1,000 athletes coming in for that as well. So we have a lot of stuff going on in sport internationally for the next few months. All right, so that's it for sport now, and back over to Mr. Gooden, Mr. Young.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from the Minister of Housing, Minister Mitchell.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the members of the media. Good afternoon to our listening and viewing audience. Today, I too have some very happy news as it touches the hundreds or even thousands of potential homeowners. Today, we announce the adjustments to government's affordable mortgage program as administered by the TTMF. As you all are aware, government's housing policy rests on 3 pillars. That is, to make housing more affordable, more accessible, and housing that improves the quality of life to citizens across Trinidad and Tobago. In that pursuit, government in 2006 had agreed to establish a mortgage finance company, Ministry of Housing, and the Ministry of Finance. The program has been in place for the past 10 years and has done well and has meant a lot to thousands of homeowners who have tapped into government's affordable mortgage program. It has been adjusted over the 10 years from time to time in keeping with the raise in property prices. So let me just restate, the following are the current features of government's affordable mortgage program to date. The maximum income for applicants to access this program under the 2% regime is $10,000. Under the 5% regime, it's $30,000. The maximum property value that can be purchased by applicants in the 2% regime is $850,000. In the 5% regime, it's $1.2 million. The maximum financing allowed for the 2% regime is 100% financing, and for the 5% regime, 95% maximum financing. The maximum term of the loan is 30 years. Maximum age to maturity for applicants is 70 years. So, in September of 2016, Cabinet had agreed to adjust, to modify government's affordable mortgage program. And if you also recall, in the budget statement, the Minister of Finance, Honourable Mr. Colmimbert, had announced certain changes that were to be made with respect to the maximum income allowed per applicant and the maximum values per property. So, in terms of the changes that we now make in respect of the 2% financing, we're increasing the qualifying income from $10,000 per month to $14,000 per month, and the property value from $850,000 to $1 million. In respect of the 5% financing, the lower limit of the qualifying income is now increased to $14,001 per month, up to a maximum of $30,000 per month. And the upper limit for property values will be increased from $1.2 million to $1.5 million. So, with these new changes, we expect a lot more citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to access government's affordable and accessible mortgage financing program. These we expect to have a tremendous effect on citizens seeking affordable homes, and these are benefits that I'm not sure that we can measure. All right, so I'll hand you now back to Mr.
Thank you
Young.
very much, Minister Mitchell. And now, Dr. Gatsby Dolly.
Good afternoon to the media and to the viewing and listening public. We are well into one of the most exciting periods of Trinidad and Tobago's annual calendar. This is our Carnival season, and it's well underway. The public may be aware, and would be because it's been in the news, that there is currently a legal matter between Pan Trinbago and the National Carnival Commission, which is the enterprise tasked with coordinating the government's carnival contributions and so on. I would just like the public to know that this in no way affects Carnival. Everything has been put in place for Carnival, and we are expecting a very successful and enjoyable Carnival for our public. And based on the turnout and the attendance at the fetes, at the panyards and so on, at the Calypso tents, it does seem that Carnival is being well enjoyed by the public, and we expect that this matter, whatever the outcome, will not affect that to any extent, and we look forward to a wonderful Carnival. And I take this opportunity to wish the national public a very good and safe Carnival, and I expect that at the end of it, you would have been refreshed, and the country would have enjoyed this most wonderful cultural explosion in Trinidad and Tobago. So I just take this opportunity to wish you all the best for Carnival and let you know that the government will ensure and that everything is in place for a successful festival.
Thank you very much. We'll now invite some questions from you, the members of the media.
Mr. Young, could you indicate whether there was any post-mortem done out of the national conversations with the Prime Minister from Monday, given all of the various comments that were said and raised regarding his remarks, and if there, as a result of any type of analysis of those statements, would there be any change to the formats going forward?
I think what we've seen coming out of Monday is a very, very successful conversation with the Prime Minister. There has been a lot of commentary in the media and in social media as well. And we will continue, the Prime Minister is going to continue as planned to do his conversations with the people. And we are very observant of the sorts of comments being made and where the commentary is coming from, etc.
Could you say what is the end result that we're looking at the end of these conversations? And what would be
Well, the format of these conversations is that the Prime Minister and on occasion other ministers would join him are engaging in conversations with the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. As you saw happen on Monday, there are other ministers in attendance and they get involved in the conversation as well, depending on the types of questions being asked. I can tell you that we are monitoring, as a government, we are monitoring the types of questions being asked and then filtering it into the relevant ministries and the relevant government agencies to ensure that it is not just a talk shop and there is follow-up and matters that need to be addressed are being addressed. Some on a more timely basis than others, but we are following up on it. So we have persons there noting what's going on, and then there's an action plan to be implemented thereafter to address the needs and the questions being raised.
Minister Gatsby, good afternoon to you, Lady Minister. While your desire that we have a happy carnival is noted, but clearly, even in the face of that desire, there are rumblings behind the scenes of, and certainly some discontent. For example, I think the Chutney Suka people have indicated that $1 million prize money, as would have been offered by your ministry, is not sufficient. Would you have a response to that? Also, would Cabinet, or would you, I know we're not supposed to be privy to, but would Cabinet have, considered that you get in to quell, those tense situations that arise with, in some communities, some interest groups that are not happy with their take or their part or their piece or their role in the Carnival celebration?
There will never be a time, I don't think, in my lifetime, that everybody is happy with everything, because the world is not perfect. And especially in situations like we are faced with now, where the government is forced to reduce expenditure based on the reduced revenue that we have, obviously there are going to be a lot of people who are not satisfied with what they have, as opposed to what they would have had before. And I can assure you that even at a time where they had more, they were not satisfied at that time either. And so therefore, we have now the task of just doing what we can with what we have available, and we look forward to more creativity. We look forward to our population being open to the option of change and restructuring with respect to how we do things with reduced circumstances. With respect to the situation with Chutney and so on, there are always differences of opinion, and the government stands ready to support all of these different genres as we go forward and as we have. But the organizers of all festivals are free also to seek other sponsorship outside of the government's assistance to be able to bolster their competitions, and they do. And so based on what they would have been able to garner, I expect that they would have offered the best package to the persons who are participating. And at this point, we do think that the best is being done on all fronts, especially on the government's side.
Some projections quickly, could you give us an idea of what is government expecting to accrue, in terms of income from Carnival celebrations in 2017, and also what has been government output to the interest groups across the broad Trinidad and Tobago for Carnival 2017?
The NCC has been allocated roughly $185 or $87 million, and what we accrue, we will see what happens at the end of Carnival. That is what we will be able to determine at that time, not at this one.
And if I may just add to that question about the chutney competition, I think it needs to be understood that the government, one of our duties and responsibilities is to manage the taxpayers' money. And in doing that, we're looking for value for money. And I think you commented about the government giving $1 million towards prize money. I just want to dispel that. The government of Trinidad and Tobago hasn't given money to the organizers for prize money. We've given money that we think the taxpayers can afford for that event, and then it is up to the organizers of the event to decide their prize money, their competition, and these types of things as an enterprise. So that is the taxpayers' contribution. As you would understand, as Minister Gadsby-Dolly has said, we're dealing now with a time and circumstances where there's a lot less revenue than there was before, and we are very, very carefully managing the taxpayers' contributions across the board.
I don't mean to steal the thunder of everyone, my colleagues here, but may I address Minister of Housing, Randall Mitchell? While government continues to make homes affordable, for our citizens, behind the scene there's a myriad of problems for current homeowners. You have people complaining about leakages and other situations, electrical problems and what have you. Is there a policy within the Ministry of Housing, as there should be, in the context of wiping out these problems so that the prospective homeowner will feel comfortable that in the event that any such problem should arise, I am on course to have my situations rectified?
Well, let's just be clear. You have various forms of tenure. You have people who own rental homes, you have rent to own, and you have persons who own their home via mortgage or outright purchase. The persons who own their home via mortgage or outright purchase, any repair to that home is their business. It's their responsibility. With respect to our rental units, yes, the HDC has a refurbishment and maintenance program, but we have to understand that a lot of these properties are very old and it takes a lot of money to maintain. And as Minister Gadsby-Dolly just alluded, the government simply does not have the amount of money that it had in the past to do it. However, with respect to our maintenance schedule, it continues. And we have a maintenance program in place, and the HDC goes about its maintenance program.
Good afternoon, Urvashi from CNC3. I just have a few silly questions, but it came from some statements. Does the Prime Minister or government officials, do they have to be in someone's bedroom to afford them help in domestic violence situations? 1. 2, what is government's policy with respect to violence against women? 2, Minister Gadsby-Dolly as a female member of cabinet, do you think that choosing a mate wisely prevents domestic abuse, and would you afford this advice to young women, probably secondary school students? And what signs do you look out for in choosing a mate?
All right, let's start with that. I think you started off by categorizing. I think I heard you say that you have some, what questions they said? Sorry? Silly questions. All right, first of all, this government is committed to trying as best as it can, working along with not only law enforcement authorities, but also social services authorities and other authorities to protect our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And when it comes to the gender-based violence, we actually were discussing it earlier this week, and it is not, we don't want to focus only on gender-based violence, but perhaps what it is dealing with the less vulnerable in society, the more vulnerable in society, and what can we do as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to help them, because it's not only about protection, but it's about being able to provide them with social services and psychological assistance and these types of things. So the government is very committed to dealing with that. I think the questions that you were asking, the other questions, apart from the one directed to Minister Gadsby-Dolly, to be quite blunt and honest, very provocative questions, and not something that we've come here at Post-Cab to deal with. This government is committed, as best as it can, to the protection of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And at the end of the day, we want to use this opportunity as well to tell people we have to look out. We are our brothers and sisters keepers, and we all have a responsibility and a duty to look out for each other. And that's what we intend to do.
Something that the country is talking about. You go into social media, you go into a shop, everywhere you go. This is the conversation that people are having. What is
and
government?
We welcome citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to have whatever conversations they want and to. and to have whatever conversations they want to and to continue the conversations. And we are having conversations.
Come up during your cabinet meeting?
Did what matter not come up during our cabinet meeting?
Violence.
But I've just told you how we as a government are intending to deal with it. And as I say, it is not only limited to gender-based violence, but violence, abuse, any issues that may affect those who are less vulnerable in society. So yes, it is something that we're looking at. It is something that we're discussing. In fact, very recently, the Minister Webster Roy, who is in charge of the Ministry to do with gender affairs, has brought to Cabinet something specifically to do with a gender policy, and it is currently before the FNGP and attracting our attention.
Rights groups, they are asking for an apology from the Prime Minister, and they're also asking to meet with him.
Well, that if they've asked to meet with the Prime Minister, then that is something for the Prime Minister to decide and to determine.
Just jumping off that same conversation, there are also calls for the Prime Minister to step down, given that it was from a former Port of Spain Mayor, Louis Lacing, who said the past Mayor, Raymond Timke, had to do that for making very similar remarks, and he's making a similar call for the resignation of Rowley now.
I certainly don't understand there to be any call for the Prime Minister to step down. That is not something that is even worthy of entertainment at this point in time. The Prime Minister continues to be Prime Minister. He has the full support of his cabinet. To hear views from some quarters that may be quarters that within recent times have found their tongue and want to comment on certain issues, again, we as a government will listen to what everybody has to say and we respond accordingly.
Do you agree that perhaps his comments were taken out of context?
Whose comments? Louis Lacing's? I think, when you go back and look at it, enough has been said with respect to those comments. I really think that as a population, we need now to focus on the conversation, and the conversation is coming out of how do we assist those who are more vulnerable in society, and what it is that we can do as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, each and every one of us, to protect those who are more vulnerable in society.
And may I just come in here to say and to address the issue directly? I have 2 daughters, and they are teenagers. And I would tell you that an ongoing conversation in my house, engaged in by both my husband and myself with my daughters, as well as my son, is the issue of toxic relationships and what is your responsibility and what you look out for as women and as men in terms of how a relationship should happen and how people should treat you and what defines a proper and a healthy relationship. So to answer your question directly and probably to close this part of the conversation on my end, there is a responsibility that everyone has to ensure that they engage to the best of their knowledge in relationships that are healthy. And that doesn't take away from the fact that there may be relationships where you thought things were okay and things turn out differently, but life is not predictable. But to the best of your ability, one must have a responsibility to ensure that you involve yourselves in relationships that seem to be healthy at the point in time.
And just to close it off, I'd like to add that we as a government in no way support any person who's a perpetrator of abuse on any member of society and any citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. We very, very strongly denounce any abuse, especially gender abuse, abuse towards children, abuse towards women. That is not something that is supported at any level from the Prime Minister go down throughout his cabinet. And I would certainly be very, very distressed if there's anybody in the whole government system that is supporting abuse towards any citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Just state.
Is there any state-run facility that a woman who is the victim of domestic violence can run to?
There are.
There are states.
They are existing, and in fact, there are some new facilities that I believe are either recently commissioned or on the verge of being commissioned, protective houses for women, children, and others who have been abused and need the protection of a safe facility. That is in existence as part of the state machinery and mechanism right now. And over the past 18 months, we've been moving as a government towards the completion of some new facilities.
Maybe more focus should have been put on that kind of information for people who are in that situation.
Absolutely. I think Minister Webster-Roy, in our conversations with her, Minister Webster-Roy is going to lead that charge going forward. Because I think what we need to focus on are what are the problems facing the society, and in particular, what are the solutions and what is available and the options out there for persons who unfortunately find themselves in these circumstances.
Whether those newly commissioned houses or safe houses and institutions, whether you can stay there together with your children, or how many of, well, I know you wouldn't know how many of them, but are there, do you think that there is efficient amount in the country? Because I know that's a problem. People who are facing well, violence in the homes have a problem in terms of finding a place, because usually they would have to separate from their children. So I don't know if you could comment on that.
Again, this is something that is being addressed out of Minister Webster-Roy's part of the Office of the Prime Minister Ministry, and it is something that we have been looking at a cabinet level and at FNGP as well. I don't think, to be honest, that there are enough state-provided facilities, but it is something we're looking at, and certainly the new ones to be open to make sure that they're properly resourced, etc. There are also a number of private sector NGOs that provide this type of service, so I know that we were looking at the continued funding and how much money the taxpayers can afford giving them going forward. And the point is taken that as this topic has arisen, it is something that we need as a government to get out there and provide the options, to let people know, look, there are options. If you're in this type of relationship, for you to get out, we encourage you, and we're providing a support structure around it. So you will see that taking place.
Question to Minister Mitchell, sorry. Now you announced the adjustment in the mortgage from 10,000 to 14,000, I believe. Can you tell me, I know that government was seeking to do private-public partnerships in terms of housing. How is that going? Because I know that there's still a long number of people on the HEC's waiting list. People may, now you're saying that you're hoping that this would allow more people to access government housing, but from the statistics, there are lots of people waiting but can't access it. So can you comment on that?
Sorry, let me just clarify one thing. The citizens who are able to access the government's affordable mortgage program, those mortgages do not only go towards the purchase of government housing, they can also go towards the purchase in the private sector. With respect to government's PPP program, it is ongoing. The first PPP project ground is expected to break the first week in March, just after Carnival. We have a number of other projects in the pipeline all across the country. So we expect to have about 2,500 housing starts this calendar year. It doesn't go a long way. Reports are that there are 120,000 persons on the HAFS database, housing applicants. But we are exploring other avenues. This is one of them, to ensure that housing is made affordable to as many citizens, as many low and middle income citizens in the country.
Because I was not going to ask you, given the higher benchmark in terms of from 10 to 14,000, those who, let us say you make 8,000, they may have been almost certain that they might qualify, given that, they may close to that 10,000, but seeing that it's 14,000, you may have people who may be worried right now that because those who make higher than them may be given first preference, and those who are not at that level might be might be left behind.
Yeah, okay. So I have to clarify again. The mortgage program and your applications to the mortgage program is a TTMF, and that has nothing to do with the HDC's allocation process. The HDC's allocation process is based on a number of criteria, and once you are selected to be allocated and you can finance, it doesn't matter whether you make 8,000, 14,000, 15,000 or 20,000. Once you can afford and you're selected, you would be given the opportunity to purchase your own home.
Would it not be the case that in order to complete the HDC allocation process, you have to have approved financing, and that TTMF, in weighing its, using commercial criteria, may lean on the side of, I'm still picking up on the fact that the people at the lower end of that scale that you have pointed out may find themselves at a disadvantage when you raise it, because TTMF may give approval to people making 14. If I were a banker, or I would give preference to someone making 14,000 as opposed to someone making 8 or 7.
Let me just go into it again. The HDC, via a random process, via a member of the protective services, or in the emergency type urgent situation. So let's say Ria Tate's name comes up to the HDC. You are called to the HDC. Okay. All right. You are called to the HDC to collect a package, and you are assessed. You're asked to bring in certain documents to prove that you can qualify for government housing according to certain criteria. Then you are financially screened and assessed by the HDC. And once you're found to be qualified, then the opportunity is given to you. So it's not the other way around. All right.
And if I may just add to what Minister Mitchell has said, just to give some explanation. This is a TTMF program, and it's the fulfillment of a promise that was made by the government in the Minister of Finance's budget speech. So you have to, as you've said, Ria, you have to qualify according to their criteria, and it's commercial or otherwise, but these things are subsidized by the government. So I don't think people should be fearful that if I'm making $8,000, but X is making $14,000, I am not going to get the mortgage because they're going to prefer to go to it. It simply does not work that way, right? It's just a granting of a mortgage. So it's either that you qualify or you don't qualify. At $8,000, you're going to qualify for a mortgage of 2% interest rate. Above $14,000, you're now going to be between $14,000 and $30,000, you're going to qualify for a 5% mortgage. So don't be fearful that because you're at the $8,000 mark, you're not going to get the mortgage, and everybody at the $14,000 mark is going to get the mortgage.
Our nightly news, television-wise, or even radio would point to people left homeless because of a fire. And consequent upon that, you will think that the AGC should be the one to rescue these people. Could we have some update on that kind of emergency situation in the context of making people feel more comfortable? Mr. Mitchell, could you hold a minute? I must address my last questions to the Minister of Sport. Minister of Sport, in the context of sports ambassadors, do we have sports ambassadors employed with Trinidad and Tobago government? To it, Brian Lara, George Bobel, Third, or whatever, could you treat with that issue? What's the update on the Tacarigua Stadium to be named the Brian Lara Stadium? Recently, we've had in the press Richard Thompson, one of our elite athletes, complaining that government has not been kind to him in the context of receiving his elite assistance.
Let's pause right here because it's difficult for us when you're hitting us so many questions to remember what. So let's start with Minister Mitchell answering the first question.
I think I may have forgotten the question. Well, let me try
the
to
question.
remember.
The question was to do with fire victims.
All right.
Fire destroys homes, and you hear people saying we have nowhere to sleep tonight.
Right. Okay. So the HGC's mandate is to provide opportunities to citizens for affordable, accessible, safe shelter. Now, these unfortunate circumstances, these unfortunate situations happen. The government does have a social safety net, all right, through the Ministry of Social Development, and there is a particular route within the HDC that these citizens can access government housing. There is an emergency procedure. However, it is a procedure, and you are means tested. You come in, you are means tested, and a decision is made whether to grant you, to allow you access to government housing. But the first stop is the Ministry of Social Development to get into that situation and to provide some sort of safety net.
All right, let me, it's because a mouthful you gave me here. The Richard Thompson, in terms of that post, First of all, let me just reiterate that this government and this minister, we said from day one in our policy moving forward that we're all about the athletes first and the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. Since taking office, we work very closely with all the governing bodies, including the NTAs, and there's an elite athlete program that was put in many years ago, and that has not changed. In fact, you would have recalled that for the first time in the history of Trinidad after the Rio Olympics, we had a post-mortem with the athletes, the media, sponsors, doctors, physiotherapists, and so on, which was went very well. And the sporting policy of Trinidad and Tobago is we're finalizing to bring a new sporting policy. We're working on that. And that consultation process that we've been doing across Trinidad and Tobago at UE, UTT, all the corners, THA did the end, and they brought all the information. We're pulling that together. But the elite athlete aspect of it is just one part of the policy. And overall, the overall consensus, and just watching what proper benchmarking has been done in Australia and other countries, they spend most of their money at the grassroots and the primary school level. And unanimously, that was the outcry from even elite athletes, saying that when they were younger, that if they had the opportunity and the funding at that age, 10, 11, 12, they would have been far better off, and we would have also gotten more Brian Laras, more Atto Bolans, more Richard Thompsons. But the policy itself hasn't changed. What we have been doing in the Ministry of Sport is tightening up with regards to the loopholes that occurred during the last 4 or 5 years in terms of bringing in your receipts and your bills and so on, and been requesting and demanding that with all the governing bodies to get funding. But it hasn't changed. So let me finish. So you would have seen the ministry sent out a press release with regards to funding for the Olympic period, the 4-year period, of which we gave 24 million to the elite athletes, of which entry athletes, track and field, got over 70% of that money. So we're here to work with all the athletes. I have an open door policy. The athletes come and meet me all the time, and we are working with Richard and the others to ensure that they follow the procedure and the policy that has been there and has never changed. And we'll sort it out. And again, we want to work to moving forward for the next Olympics, and especially for the new sporting policy that we plan to launch once Cabinet has approved it and move forward. In terms of the sports ambassador, Brian Lara, Hazy Crawford, Dwight York, and Ganga are the 4 sports ambassadors we have with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we're working with Brian and Hazley and soon Dwight York. And we're having conversations with Ganga now as well. And in terms of the Brian Lara Stadium, work is continuing. The outfield looks beautiful. They're working on the pitch now. They're finalizing finishing work, which takes some time. Mr. Lara himself has been very, very happy with the work so far, and we have involved him in the whole process for the first time. He feels very involved now, and he has a say, because I don't think there's anybody in the region, probably in the world, that have played in the best facilities of cricket across the globe. So he's bringing new ideas, because remember the design and stuff was a few years ago, and he's working very closely. But finishing takes some time. But we're also talking to him about the opening as well, because of course it's his facility, and he has some ideas for the opening and a date that he wants the opening, where he could have certain persons, his international icons around the world come, and again that has to go through Cabinet as well. But you're going to be seeing soon some, I don't want to use the word test, because we did it with the aquatic, the racket, and the cycling, where we had some test events. Cricket test means actual test, but you may be seeing soon in the next few weeks, Brian himself and a couple other high schools and UB and stuff just testing the pitch, so we could get it. But we're on stream so far, and we're excited, and the public is excited to have, for the first time, the government having a world-class cricket facility.
Okay, we'll take a couple more questions. Ria?
Have any position on what is happening with Mr. Raul Balgubin?
Does the government have any position
On what has taken place there? This thing has been playing out in the public domain for some time, and several of the unions have taken it up, some workers have taken it up. I mean, does the government have a position? Because he's, of course, holding positions on.
Well, the position that Mr. Balgubin holds, that the government participates in, is as the chairman of CLF. And as a result of being the chairman of CLF, he then holds another number of nominal directorships in companies that are part of the CLF group. we have observed what has been taking place within recent times, meaning the media stories and the unions' objections and protests, etc. And this is something that is part of the conversation taking place at our level.
Conversation is needed too.
That conversation is a conversation that is taking place.
With no final.
Well, there has not been a decision, no.
Minister of Finance and the Economy, Mr. Colin Membert, is not here, but may I ask, has the government as a whole seen any kind of slight improvement in our economic fortunes, given the fact that we know what the budget was based on and what has happened from then to now?
As you say, the Minister of Finance isn't here. He would be the person in the best position to answer that question. I think it's no secret that fortunately we've seen slight increases in the world selling price of oil, but at the same time we've had our production rates suffering some levels of a downward trend within recent times. You've heard the Prime Minister say that very soon we're going to begin addressing the Petrotrin issues. With respect to the stance of the economy, those questions are best left up to the Minister of Finance and or the Governor of the Central Bank.
I can also ask about Labour. The Minister of Labour is not also here, but clearly there's a February 28th ultimatum or deadline by the OWTU.
Well, it's not a deadline by the OWTU. There's a court deadline. The matter is in court, that matter which is between OWTU and Petrotrin for the years 2011 to 2014 is currently before the court for conciliation. So we don't want to say very much about that at this stage. We expect and we understand that the parties are working assiduously towards that deadline. As the country is aware, Petrotrin did put on the table an interim offer which was accepted of 5% for that period of time. And I am personally aware that the parties are working towards a resolution, knowing that the date is the 28th of February. And yeah, okay,
Last question. Soon, but it's a little bit early, but can you tell me, have you heard anything from the Trinidad Theatre Workshop as yet, and conversations began?
Yes, we've spoken with the Trinidad Theatre Workshop. We have made intervention on their behalf to the Minister of Public Administration to determine whether there is a public building available. But as we discussed with them, the issue is that the building is up for sale. It is not that they have been put out of the building. They do have a lease existing until June of this year, and there is no indication at this time that there is any issue with the use of the building. So we have opened the lines of communications with them, and they know that we are trying that route, but at this point in time, there is no crisis to be averted, and so we continue to work with them based on that.
thank you very much, members of the media. Do get home and get back to your places of work safely. Take care.